Have you ever visited a national park? Maybe you've stood on the edge of the Grand Canyon or seen the giant limestone arches in Arches National Park. Maybe you've been to Yellowstone and seen the giant geyser Old Faithful. Or maybe you've watched the sunrise in Acadia National Park. Whether you've been lucky enough to visit one of these parks or have only seen them in pictures or on TV, you have John Muir to thank for preserving these national treasures. John Muir is my hero. He's known as the father of the national park system, and he is my hero for three reasons. He was an avid outdoorsman and explorer. He was a geological theorist, and he was able to convince President Theodore Roosevelt that the best way to preserve the Yosemite Valley and all of the United States' most beautiful natural features was with federal protection. First, I'd like to tell you about John Muir's life as an explorer. When he was 28 years old, he suffered an injury to his eye that required him to live for 6 weeks in a dark room to recover. After he healed, he was determined to follow his dream of exploration and the study of plants. He then traveled to and explored much of the Yosemite Valley, which he had only ever read about. There, he was overcome by its beauty and built a cabin in the valley where he lived, hiked, and wrote for 2 years. There he also saw firsthand the danger that the valley was in from farming and livestock. He wrote that the cattle there were like hooved locusts. These early explorations became his later inspirations for preserving nature. Next, I'd like to tell you about John Muir's work in geology. While living in Yosemite, he had time to appreciate the geological formations all around him. At the time, the prevailing theory was that Yosemite Valley and similar valleys throughout the country were formed by massive earthquakes from long ago. Muir's theory was that the valley was formed by glaciers. He hypothesized that during the Ice Age, giant glaciers moved through the valley and carved away the stone to leave the valley that we see today. During his explorations, he discovered previously unknown glaciers there. This helped to support his theory. Eventually, his theory spread, and it is now the best understanding we have as to how these natural formations came to exist. Finally, I'm going to tell you about how John Muir was able to personally convince the president at the time, Theodore Roosevelt, to begin protecting Yosemite and other national parks on the national level. At the time, the only national park was Yellowstone, but Muir believed this special federal protection should be extended to Yosemite and other parks as well. In 1903, Muir convinced Roosevelt to accompany him on a trip to Yosemite. The president came with a large entourage that included several aides and guards. After a couple of days in the valley, Muir took the president and only a few companions to see the real Yosemite. This departure took longer than expected, and eventually soldiers were sent in after them to make sure the president was all right. During this time alone, Muir was able to convince Roosevelt of the importance of preserving places like Yosemite Valley, and Roosevelt agreed that these places should be nationally protected. In conclusion, John Muir is my hero because he was an explorer, a pioneering geologist, and the father of the country's national parks. He was even willing to risk stealing the president away for a few days to get his point across. I'd like to leave you with a quote. "Everybody needs beauty as well as bread, places to play in and pray in, where nature will heal and give strength to body and soul alike."